Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, we're back with a new Big Brother US What If video. It's been a while, but here we're going to be talking about what if final jurors won final HOH. Which I've done a similar concept to this for Survivor, but I did feel like Big Brother here does get a bit interesting when you play this out, as I do feel like there are a lot of situations where the final juror might actually win at the end, and a lot of questionable outcomes as well. So I did think this was pretty fun. Now we will be only running through the main series here, mainly because, I mean, again, celebrity is just all over the place, and OTT doesn't really work within this format, so we will only be talking about the main series here. Also not talking about BB1 because obviously it was a radically different format. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. Let's start talking about BB2. We're obviously assuming that Monica wins final HOH, and this one actually is a pretty easy one. I think she clearly takes Will. She had promised Will she was going to take him, and also was pretty anti-Nicole at that point. So I do feel like she was clearly taking Will, and I do feel like Monica wins the game. The question is by how much? If I were to guess, I would lean towards probably a 7-2 vote without including the nullified votes, which in that case probably 6-1, where I do think Will gets Boogie and Shannon. However, I think Monica probably gets everyone else. Now, I do think there's a semblance of a chance that Nicole votes for Will, but I mean, considering she would be on the outside and had been able to talk to her husband, who was very upset at Will and all this other stuff, I feel like more than likely she would vote against Will. And I do feel like more than likely Monica wins in a 6-1 vote there. Next up, we have BB3, which is also not a particularly interesting situation here. Again, here we are assuming that Jason wins final HOH. He clearly takes Danielle to the end, and he clearly wins. And I think he might actually win unanimously. Like, again, I do think there are some question marks with certain votes. Some people like a Jerry, some people like a Josh, an Amy, a Kiara. Like, there are some people that are a bit of question marks, but I don't think it's nearly enough to where Jason would lose against Danielle. I think it's pretty locked in that he wins, though I think there's a chance that Danielle could get a vote or two, but I think Jason might even win unanimously. Now for BB3, where we have Robert being the final HOH, and I actually did some research in this one because I actually did not remember who Robert would have taken. From what I understand, he did have a final 2 deal with Allison by that point in the game. And if he does take Allison to the end, Robert does clearly win here. I think he gets at least 4 votes. Having G, Justin, and Dana under any scenario. And then I think against Allison, he would also have Erica. And that is 4 votes, and he's already the winner. The other 3 votes are a bit up for grabs, where I think Allison probably gets June's, even though June was not that big of a fan of Allison. I do think she also hated Robert. I do think Nathan still sides with Allison, but Jack could go either way, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Either way, Robert ends up winning the game here. Now for BB5, where Diane would have won HOH, and I think she clearly takes Drew. Again, I don't think it ever crossed her mind to not take Drew to the end. The question is who wins, because I do think this is actually a pretty close vote. I think Diane for sure gets Nokomis, Karen, and Will. Drew obviously gets Cowboy, and I do think Adria and Natalie would lean towards Drew in this situation, considering that they were close to both Cowboy and Drew at the time that they went home. So at that point, that means Marvin is essentially the swing, and I don't exactly know where he goes. I would actually lean towards him going Diane, as I do know those two are particularly close by the time he left the house, but I can see an argument for him going for Drew as well. But again, it is a very close vote, but if you were to make me pick, I would say Diane probably ends up winning this one. BB6 is kind of a situation that we kind of have confirmed, where Janelle would have taken Yvette to the end, and Yvette would have won the game with the votes of the former friendship members, getting the votes of Maggie, Bo, April, and Jennifer, and she might even get James's vote in that situation as well, while Janelle is only locked in to get Howie and Rachel, meaning that obviously Yvette ends up winning that one. BB7, with Janelle having final HOH, I do think she takes Erica to the end, and this is a pretty boring result because I do think Janelle wins, and it might even be unanimous, where I do think Chilltown votes for her, I feel like Danielle votes for her, I feel like Howie votes for her, I feel like Chicken George votes for her. I do feel like there's a question mark with James, but I do feel like he respected Janelle more than Erica. And Marcellus could go either way. He was friends with both of them. But again, I feel like there could be a unanimous vote here. Now for BB8, where this one we kind of know about as well, where Zach would have taken Dick to the end and Zach would naturally win the game. Now there is some question mark in the sense that Eric was America's player and 100% Dick would have won the public vote here, meaning that Zach would get the votes of Danielle and Eric. Now it comes down to how much Eric is really going to fight to have Dick as the winner, considering Eric himself didn't want Dick to be the winner. And I do feel like this is a big question mark that I have of how this would have affected the votes, because I think if Eric really, really wanted to, he could have flipped the votes. I think he had the influence to do so. The question is, would he have done it? But I think in a natural jury vote here, Zach definitely wins here, with Dick really only getting Danielle and then Eric because he's forced to. Now for BB9, and this one's a bit interesting. I mean, Sheila would win final HOH, and I do think she takes Adam. The question here is, does Adam win? And I think he does, but I know there's some people that say that Sheila wins if she gets to the end. I don't fully agree with it based on how the jury is laid out, because I think Adam has 3 locked in jury votes here. I think he has Ryan, Natalie, and Matt locked in. I think 100%. So that means that there are 4 votes up for grabs, and that means that Sheila would need all 4 of those, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, but I do feel like it is kind of unlikely, especially when James and Chelsea are 2 of those votes, in a position where James was very close to Adam at the time that he left, and also was very angry at Sheila at the time that he left. So I don't think Sheila wins here. I would lean towards Adam winning in at least a 5-2 vote. I do think Sheila could definitely get Sharon's vote, and maybe Josh's, but it's like, really, I mean, I think there's still a chance of a unanimous vote on Adam's end here as well. I don't think it's definitely a guarantee, and by any means, that Sheila even gets a single vote here. Next up, we have BB10, and I've talked about this situation a lot. I don't know how this plays out. Again, we have Jerry winning final HOH. He does take Memphis. I think that's pretty clear. The question is, who wins? I don't know. I really don't know who the jury respected more. I tried to do some research into this and really couldn't find the answer either. I think Dan votes for Memphis for sure, but I think it's close between every other vote. Again, Keisha was upset at Memphis, but was she so upset that she wouldn't have voted for him over Jerry? I don't know. We obviously have like Ollie and April, who were closer to Jerry, but I don't know if they respected Jerry. Libra wasn't particularly close to either of them, but did at least work with Memphis more in the game. Michelle worked with both of them at different points within the game, so that's also a question mark. Rennie, again, hated both of them, so it's like, I really don't know. I don't know where this jury vote goes. Where again, like, I tried to look it up, and I didn't really find a solid answer. I think my gut tells me Memphis wins, but again, that's purely speculation there. Next up, we have BB11, and here we have Kevin winning HOH, and he takes Jordan for some reason, which is not the right move. I mean, if he takes Natalie, I'm pretty sure he wins unanimously, probably. But against Jordan, it's very close. But from what I understand, everything he said postseason is that he would have taken Jordan, and he even said that in the house too. So again, if he takes Jordan, it's close. I think Natalie's the swing, actually, which is the more disturbing thing. Because again, I think Jordan for sure gets Jeff, Michelle, and America's vote, while Kevin would get Jesse, Lydia, and Russell. Now, Kevin would have won for sure if Shima had been on the jury instead of America, to where he has 4 locked-in votes in that situation, but Shima got expelled, so she didn't get a vote. And really, that means it all comes down to Natalie, who Kevin supposedly just voted out. So it's not looking great. I would still lean towards Kevin getting Natalie's vote still, but it's definitely not guaranteed. And I could definitely see Natalie being bitter at the end, so definitely a bit up for grabs. Next up, BB12, and here we have Enzo having it final HOH. He takes Hayden, and I think Hayden wins unanimously. I mean, Enzo has a chance at getting Brennan and Rachel's vote. I think it is a bit of a question mark because I know they were closer to Enzo than Hayden, but they did also talk about how no one respected Enzo's game, but also talked about how they didn't respect Hayden's game at the time, though that perception has changed over time. But again, like at the time, I don't know where they would have gone, but to be honest, it doesn't matter anyway. I think Hayden had 4 locked-in votes against anyone anyway if he were to get to the end. Again, he had Matt, Reagan, Kathy, and Lane in this situation pretty much guaranteed. And he would also get Brittany against Enzo. So again, he would win at least 5-2. So Brennan and Rachel's votes don't really matter at the end of the day. Next up for BB13, we have Adam winning final HOH. And I do think he takes Portia. I mean, he was closer to Rachel over the course of the game. However, he definitely had an anti-returnee sentiment by the end of the season. So I do think he would have taken Portia. And I think Portia beats him. I mean, Adam does get Jeff and Jordan for sure in that situation. And possibly even Shelly, but I don't even think that's a guarantee. I think Portia for sure gets Danny and Kalia, and then also Brendan and Rachel, and that's enough to win there. But again, might even get Shelly as well. So I think for sure Portia wins that final 2 scenario. Next up for BB 14, where Danielle wins final HOH, and I do think she ends up taking Dan, obviously. And she probably wins. I mean, I think Dan definitely gets votes. I think Brittany does vote for Dan. I think Ian votes for Dan. To be honest, Ashley might even vote for Dan. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. However, I think Danielle has Shane, Jen, Joe, and Frank pretty locked in at that point. I don't think there's really a chance. I mean, supposedly Frank wasn't as bitter as what it seemed, to where he was a bit more open to voting for Dan in certain situations. However, again, like Danielle just has such the advantage in this situation to where I do feel like Danielle wins this jury scenario. Next up for BB 15, and this one's a bit of a question mark. Obviously, Spencer would be the final HOH. I don't know who he takes. The thing is, like, he had a final 2 deal with Andy and was a lot closer to Andy throughout the game. However, he loses to Andy for sure in the end, like probably unanimously, if not like he maybe gets Judd's vote, but like almost for sure loses. While if he takes Gina Marie to the end, which I feel like he has got to know is the logical move, then he wins in a 7-2 vote, getting the exact same votes that Andy got, but just for him instead. And like, I don't know which way he goes. Again, like my gut says that he would have realized the situation, went and voted out Gina Marie, but I don't think it's a guarantee, especially because I feel like I remember him talking about wanting to take Andy to the end, which is, again, not great. Now for BB 16, where Victoria somehow wins final HOH, which was obviously very likely, and she obviously takes Derek here, and I think Derek wins unanimously, maybe? I mean, again, Donnie and Jocasta were angry at Derek, so they could put votes on to Victoria, I guess. But, I mean, even then, I mean, Derek wins pretty handily here. It's not really close because Victoria definitely had a shot at winning had Derek cut Cody to take Victoria, or Cody cut Derek to take Victoria through the pact that they had made. Now, I don't know if they would have stuck by it, but again, there was a pact to vote for Victoria had they not taken each other to the end. But in this situation where Victoria wins final HOH, that's pretty void here. So again, I feel like Derek definitely wins this. Now for BB 17, we have Vanessa having final HOH. And again, we clearly know how this turns out. I mean, she takes Liz. Liz gets Austin and Julia's votes. Vanessa gets the remaining 7. I think it's a pretty clear cut. We pretty much know this for sure. Now for BB 18, we have James having the final HOH. And he has pretty much confirmed that he would have taken Paul. And I know there has been some claims recently by Davon that James would have won if he got into the end. I personally don't believe it. I do think Paul still wins this. Now, I do think James gets Michelle and Natalie, and possibly Davon, though I feel like a lot of her saying that is a complete retcon, but whatever. I think Paul for sure gets, obviously, Victor. I think he gets Nicole, gets Corey, gets Pauly, gets Zakiya, and that already is enough in that situation. I think Bridget would even lean towards Paul. So again, I do feel pretty confident that Paul ends up winning that one. Now for BB 19, where Christmas somehow wins final HOH, and I think it's pretty clear that she takes Paul to the end. The question is, does the jury still go through with their plan to vote bitterly here? And I do think that they do. I mean, from what I understand, Josh was actually beating both Paul and Christmas at the end, but the pact that was made was specifically to make sure Paul didn't win. So I do feel like it would have been the same, just all the Josh votes go on to Christmas. But I do think in this scenario, there probably is a higher chance of someone like an Alex not fully going through with the plan, but I do still think it probably ends up happening and Christmas still wins 5-4. Now for BB 20, and here we have JC having final HOH, and I think he clearly takes Tyler and ends up probably winning the game against Tyler. Now, I think Tyler for sure gets Casey and Angela's votes. I do think he also gets Bailey, again, against JC. But I do think the remainder of the votes probably go to JC. I mean, we've heard from the Haley, Fessy, Scotty, Rockstar contingent that they were rooting for JC by the end of the season. Brett was very close to JC by the end of the season and was rooting for him on his way out. And then we also have Sam, who was not particularly happy with Tyler on the way out and was also very pro JC. So again, I think it's a 6-3 vote where JC ends up winning it. Now for BB21, where we do have Nicole being final HOH, and she does end up taking Holly. Now, I do think this is a little bit up in the air. Now, Nicole for sure gets Cliff and Jessica, while Holly obviously for sure gets Jackson. Now, I do think Kat leans towards Nicole based on what she said postseason, but she didn't know Holly from real life. So I do think there's a chance she goes for Holly. But really, all of this doesn't matter because really the entire vote is dictated by the contingent of Tommy, Christy, Nick, Annalise, and Jack that I do think were voting together. Now, I do think they were leaning towards Nicole by this point in the game, but I do think they could have been swayed to vote for Holly. But again, like, when are they going to be swayed? I mean, Jackson's not going to have enough time to prop her up in the jury questioning, and jury questioning's so short to begin with. So I do think they lean towards Nicole, so I would say that Nicole wins, but I don't think it was 100% locked in. Now for BB22, and here we have Nicole Franzel having final HOH, and I do think she ends up taking Cody. That was been her plan the entire time. And I think Cody still wins, but there are definitely people that aren't guaranteed Cody votes. I mean, Cody for sure gets Enzo, Tyler, Danny, and Devon. That's 4 votes. There are 5 up for grabs, but I feel like almost every other vote still leans Cody. I mean, Ian, I think, is extremely leading towards Cody, but he did have a strong personal relationship with Nicole Franzel. Both Memphis and Christmas seem to be complimentary of Nicole Franzel on their way out, and I think there's a chance that they vote for her, especially Christmas, but I feel like Memphis would at the end of the day probably still go Nicole. And then Kevin and David were supposedly up for grabs, but again, I do feel like they probably lean Cody. But again, like, Nicole Franzel could definitely get some votes in this situation, but I do feel like Cody has enough there with 4 absolute locks and 2 other that are leaning his way that it's enough to pretty much say that he was going to win for sure. And last up, we have BB23, and here we have Ozza winning final HOH, and she takes Xavier. Somehow we're in the world where she knows she has a better chance at winning against Big D. Would have had the choice between essentially winning and losing the game, and would have actively chosen to lose. And yeah, I mean, I think Xavier beats her. Now, the exact vote count, again, could be unanimous, but I do feel like probably someone ends up giving Ozza a sympathy vote along the way, particularly probably Brittany is the most likely, but again, Xavier pretty clearly wins it still. But there we go. I mean, that is every what if scenario of what if the final jurors won final HOH. Again, there's a lot of Big Brother what if videos I still have planned down the road. Probably the next one will be what if every season didn't have a Final Four veto, as I feel like that would be an interesting exercise to go through. I don't know how much it really changes things at points, but again, we'll figure it out from doing the video. So again, stay tuned for that. Obviously more Big Brother rankings down the road and Survivor videos down the road. But for now, this video, thank you for watching.